Go ahead, let him take it, I told my fiance's family when they gave my inheritance to his more responsible brother. I guess tattoos make me untrustworthy, I said as they whispered. 6 months later, he was in rehab and they were begging me to help. What they didn't know was, I'd been quietly investing my side hustle earnings all along. My fiance's wealthy family thought I was unfit to manage my own inheritance because I didn't look or act like them. They convinced me to let his older brother manage it. I let them. 6 months later, the money was mostly gone, the brother was in rehab, and they came crawling back to ask for my help. They had no idea I'd been quietly investing my side hustle money the whole time and didn't need them, or their approval. You're being emotional, Cassie. This is just a smart move, Mark told me, trying to take my hand across his parents' oversized dining table. His mother was sipping white wine like she hadn't just suggested handing over the money my mother left me to her other son. Martin knows what he's doing, she added gently, smiling like I should be flattered they were offering me this lifeline. He's got experience, and you, well, you're so creative. You should be focused on that. I guess tattoos make me untrustworthy, I muttered, mostly to myself. Nobody denied it. So I said it loud enough for the whole room to hear, go ahead. Let him take it. Back up a little. I'm 36 now, but this story starts when I was 30 and in what I thought was a serious, healthy engagement. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina, born and raised. I'm a hands-in-the-dirt kind of woman. I make leather goods, restore old furniture, and ride a bike that I rebuilt with a neighbor who drinks too much bourbon and knows everything about Harley engines. Mark and I met when I sold him a mid-century desk for his new office. He was charming, polite, and ridiculously polished. The kind of man who made you feel like maybe, just maybe, you were the lucky one to be chosen. We hit it off, and within a year, he proposed. At first, things were great. His family lived in Wilmington, a picture-perfect coastal city with homes that looked like they belonged in a Nancy Meyers movie. But his family was different. Cold, not outright mean, just dismissive. Like they were humoring me. His mom, Joanna, is the kind of woman who says things like, I love that you're so independent, with that thin little smile that means she doesn't approve. His dad, Peter, is quieter but always has the last word. And then there's Martin, the older brother, who wore expensive watches and called my Etsy business a craft hobby when we first met. They were the kind of family that believed success came with a business degree and a country club membership, not from staining your hands with dye and glue. After my mom passed, I inherited her property, a small commercial building in the heart of Asheville that she'd bought way back when nobody wanted it. Turns out it was worth a fortune now. Between the building and a life insurance policy she had taken out on herself, I was sitting on about $400,000 total. I didn't grow up with much, so it felt massive. And it came with responsibility, which I took seriously. But the minute the Langdons found out about it, I became the girl with the money to manage. Suddenly, Mark's parents were calling me more often. They wanted to help, to guide, to advise. At first, I appreciated it. But the tone shifted fast. They weren't suggesting, I realized they were steering. Joanna started bringing up Martin at every dinner. He's been managing his own portfolio since college. Martin understands asset diversification. Have you considered setting up a trust? Martin could walk you through it. I smiled through gritted teeth. Then came the dinner that changed everything. They invited us for what I thought was a casual weekend visit. Instead, they sat me down and presented the idea that Martin would temporarily manage my inheritance through a family trust for stability's sake. At first, I thought it was a joke. I was already investing small amounts myself, mostly in dividend stocks and an online portfolio that my friend Tamika helped me set up. Tamika is a CPA and one of the few people who actually listened when I said I didn't want to waste what my mom left behind. But none of that mattered to them. I didn't wear blazers. I didn't go to business school. I didn't look the part. Mark didn't defend me. He didn't tell them to stop. He just said, it's temporary. Let's do what's best for our future. That line right there, that's when I realized I was marrying into a family that didn't see me as an equal. They saw me as a project. A charity case with a windfall they wanted to protect. So I said fine. I signed the papers. And I let Martin take control of managing the liquid funds, not the property, just the money. They thought they won. What they didn't know was that I never stopped working. I never stopped investing the earnings from my Etsy store or the weekend landscaping gigs I picked up. I lived below my means and poured money into a vending machine business that Tamika and I started. We bought used machines off Craigslist, refurbished them, and placed them in local businesses around Asheville and Hendersonville. People laughed when I said I was doing it, but in 6 months, we were turning over a few thousand in passive income monthly. Meanwhile, Martin was burning through my inheritance like it was monopoly money. I didn't know all the details at the time, but I had a gut feeling. I saw him post photos with luxury rentals. I overheard him talking about a can't-miss opportunity in crypto. He started looking more anxious. Thinner. He was drinking more. Mark still didn't ask questions. He was busy planning our wedding, with Joanna, mostly. I was slowly detaching, watching them make decisions like I wasn't even there. Every time I spoke up, I was told to be patient. Then, 6 months after I handed over the money, I got the call. Joanna's voice was different, nervous, not condescending. "Cassie, we need to talk." I already knew. Martin was in rehab. The money? Mostly gone. He had used it to cover gambling debts, risky crypto trades, and God knows what else. They hadn't just mismanaged it, they had let him destroy it. Peter tried to act like it was a bump in the road. Mark looked ashamed, but not nearly ashamed enough. Then came the ask. They wanted me to sell the Asheville property, the one asset left, to cover Martin's debts and restore some balance to the family trust. They hinted it was the right thing to do. The responsible thing. Mark actually said it would show good faith. That's when I realized he never really saw me either. You know when you have one of those moments where the fog lifts, and everything is just clear? I looked at Mark and said, "I won't help fix something you all broke. I let you take it. Now I'm taking me back." He looked stunned. And maybe, for a second, like he finally saw me. But it was too late. I walked away from the relationship. I never got the inheritance back, but I didn't need it. I had my business. My property. My vending machines. My sanity. They thought they'd buried me. They didn't know I was planting seeds. The day I walked out of Mark's parents' home after that conversation, I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't even yell. I just picked up my overnight bag, left my half-drunk tea on their marble kitchen counter, and drove back to Asheville in silence. I remember the sunset in the rearview mirror, fiery, bleeding orange into purple, like even the sky was trying to warn me something was burning down behind me. Mark called a few times that week. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that shifted in tone with each attempt, calm, then desperate, then apologetic, then angry. The last one said, "I'm trying to save us." I didn't bother listening to the rest. Because at that point, I didn't know what us even meant anymore. There was no us. There was only them. And me. What hit me the hardest in the days after wasn't even the loss of the money. That part hurt, yes. My mom had worked so hard for it, she'd cleaned motel rooms when I was little just to squirrel away enough to eventually buy that downtown building. But what hurt more was the way they dismissed me. Like I'd never been capable. Like I was something to be tolerated and corrected. I couldn't stop thinking about all the little moments where I laughed off their digs or ignored their judgments. How I'd smoothed my voice at dinner parties to sound more neutral. How I'd started dressing a little plainer when we visited Wilmington. It wasn't just about money, it was about how I shrank myself to be loved. But the thing about shrinking is, eventually, you disappear. And I didn't want to disappear. So I did what I do best, I got to work. I leaned harder into my side hustles. Tamika and I expanded the vending machine business into 3 new locations that summer. I started hand-tooling more premium leather pieces, custom belts, and bags that took me days to finish, and I priced them like they were worth it. Because they were. And to my surprise, they sold. A little boutique in West Asheville asked to carry my stuff. Then a second one in Brevard. I also finally got the courage to revisit a dream I'd shelved, buying a little bit of land in Black Mountain. I'd been eyeing a 3-acre plot that was mostly overgrown but had a fixer-upper cabin and a greenhouse frame. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I paid the down payment with money from the vending machines. I cried when I signed the deed, not because I was sad, but because it felt like someone I used to be was finally catching up to who I was becoming. Meanwhile, the Langdons were unraveling. I started hearing from people in Wilmington. Mutual acquaintances. Even some of Mark's extended family. Turns out Martin's stint in rehab was just the tip of the iceberg. He'd lied to investors, borrowed money he couldn't repay, and even used his parents' names to secure lines of credit. It wasn't just my inheritance that went up in smoke, he'd dragged their whole family reputation through the mud. Word spread quickly, and the same people who used to fawn over the Langdon name started distancing themselves. I kept quiet. Not out of pettiness, but because I'd already said everything I needed to say. Tamika used to joke, "You're a damn ninja. They never saw you coming." I wasn't trying to be sneaky. I was just done explaining myself. I remember the first time Joanna called me again after the fallout. She didn't even say hello. Just jumped straight into it. "We didn't know," she said. That was it. No apology. No accountability. Just we didn't know, like ignorance somehow made it okay. I let her talk. Something about how they were in the process of restructuring the family trust, how Martin was seeking spiritual guidance, how Mark was having a hard time. She paused, like she expected me to say something. All I said was, "I hope he's okay." And then I hung up. The silence that followed was freeing. No more family dinners where I pretended to enjoy small talk about investment portfolios. No more being scrutinized for every decision, every outfit, every word that wasn't polished enough for their standard. Just quiet. I poured myself into the cabin. I spent days pulling weeds, planting vegetables, fixing up the plumbing, and getting the greenhouse up and running again. I brought in a local carpenter to help install solar panels. I slept better than I had in years. My leather shop started turning a profit that could have supported me even if I hadn't had any other income streams. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. I didn't just survive, I was thriving. One afternoon, months after I'd moved to Black Mountain for good, I stopped by a local market to drop off some of my goods for a vendor booth. And that's when I saw Mark. He looked different. Not bad, just smaller. Like someone had drained the energy out of him. He was wearing a hoodie, hands in his pockets, and he looked like he hadn't shaved in a few days. He spotted me and walked over. "Cass," he said, softly. I nodded. "Mark." We stood there for a minute in that weird, heavy silence where you both know nothing's going back to how it was. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I heard you've been doing really well." "I have," I said. "That's good. That's really good." He didn't ask to get back together. He didn't make any excuses. He just stood there and looked at me the way people look at paintings they don't understand, like I was something he could have had, but never really saw. Before he walked away, he said, "I didn't know how strong you were." I could have told him I always was. But instead, I just said, "I did." Then I turned back to my car and drove home to the cabin I built with money he didn't know existed, for a life he never thought I could build. Mark didn't reach out again after that day at the market. And I didn't expect him to. That was the nature of our ending, quiet, like the last flicker of a candle before it gives up. Not with a bang, not even with real closure. Just the calm acknowledgement that the version of us that once existed had no place in the life I was living now. But that didn't mean everything fell neatly into place. Healing isn't linear, and it sure as heck isn't instant. Even when you know you made the right decision, grief has a way of sneaking in through the side door. I'd be planting herbs one morning and out of nowhere, I'd remember that dinner at Peter and Joanna's house, the way Joanna passed me the wine glass with that too smooth smile, or how Peter called me passionate in a tone that barely concealed his condescension. And for a second, I'd feel small again. That little sting of being underestimated, mislabeled, and told to trust someone who never earned it. But then I'd look down at my dirt-streaked hands, at the calluses that had built up from months of honest work, and I'd remind myself, I built this. They didn't. And slowly, those memories lost their power. Life in Black Mountain settled into a rhythm. Quiet mornings with strong coffee on the porch. Leather dye staining my fingernails. Tamika coming by on Fridays to check our vending reports and have a beer on the steps. I started teaching leatherworking classes out of the greenhouse once a month. Locals signed up, older folks, curious teens, even a retired librarian who made the most beautiful, delicate coin purses I'd ever seen. Word got around. Cassie from the cabin became something people said with familiarity. The woman who rode the matte black Harley. The one who built a business out of nothing but scraps, scars, and stubbornness. And then, somewhere in that peaceful stretch of months, I got a letter. Not a call. Not an email. A letter, folded neat and clean, with Mark's handwriting on the front of the envelope. Just seeing it pulled something tight in my chest. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't manipulative. It was a confession. He told me about the fallout with his parents. How they blamed him for letting me go and resented him for not stepping in when Martin spiraled. How Martin had checked in and out of 3 rehab programs and was now living in some halfway house in Raleigh, completely cut off from the family. And how Peter's name was now on every remaining debt, because Martin had used their trust as collateral without proper legal clearance. The Langdon legacy was crumbling, and no one could figure out how to fix it. The letters Mark received from lawyers were piling up. Joanna, apparently, had retreated entirely, staying in her bedroom most days, afraid of facing their friends, ashamed of the scandal. He didn't ask me for anything. He just wrote, "I should have stood beside you. I see that now." I read it twice. Then I folded it, put it in a drawer, and didn't look at it again for weeks. Not because I was angry. I wasn't anymore. I think part of me had been waiting for that letter, not for an apology, but for proof that they knew. That they finally knew. Sometimes closure doesn't come from a conversation. Sometimes it's just a quiet knowing. Things moved slowly after that. I added another vending machine route, started hiring high school kids to help clean and stock them on weekends. Paid them better than minimum wage, taught them how to budget the cash, even helped one of them open her first checking account. I didn't go looking for these opportunities, they just seemed to find me. And maybe I needed that. A reminder that the world still turns, that life keeps extending open palms when you stop waiting for permission to take it. But then, months later, I ran into Joanna. I wasn't expecting it. I was dropping off leather pieces to a boutique near the Biltmore estate, chatting with the owner about a pop-up event, when I heard my name spoken behind me like it was dipped in honey and guilt. Cassie? I turned. And there she was. Slimmer than I remembered, her once perfectly styled blonde hair now pulled back in a practical ponytail, sunglasses perched on her head like she'd just stepped out of a PTA meeting that didn't go well. She was holding a reusable grocery bag and wore no makeup, a rare sight. We stared at each other for a beat. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, like I was the one trespassing. "This is my drop-off day," I said plainly. She nodded, clutched her bag a little tighter. "I heard you've done, well, with the cabin. And your work." I gave a small smile. "I've been lucky. And I work hard." There was a long pause. Then she said it. "I misjudged you." It wasn't quite an apology. But it was more than I ever thought I'd get from her. I didn't say anything. I let the silence do the work for me. She cleared her throat. Peter and I, well, we're adjusting to a new reality. A lot of friends have pulled away. It's humbling. Sounds like it, I said, not cruelly, just honestly. She hesitated again. I know it's not my place, but I'm sorry for everything. Truly. I nodded. Not because I forgave her in that moment, but because I believed she meant it. Even if she didn't know how to say it right. We parted ways without ceremony. I walked out into the bright sun, loaded my crates into the back of my truck, and thought about how full circle everything had become. The family that once saw me as unstable now clung to whatever scraps of stability they could find. And the woman they underestimated had built a foundation so solid it couldn't be shaken. But the thing is, none of that even felt like revenge anymore. It just felt like peace. And that was a new kind of power I wasn't done learning how to carry. Story to be continued. Let me know when you're ready for more. This story's still got plenty of life in it. After that unexpected run-in with Joanna, I didn't think much more about the Langdons. I had too much going on. The summer season meant more tourists, more foot traffic at the boutique, and more local events. I even hosted a 2-day outdoor leather workshop that got featured in a regional magazine. It was surreal seeing my name and photo in print, standing in front of my greenhouse with my apron on and leather dye up to my elbows. The write-up called me an Appalachian entrepreneur with grit and grace. I kept a copy of it taped inside my studio. And then came the email. I almost deleted it without reading. It was from an unfamiliar address, subject line, Langdon Property, Wilmington. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. It was from a realtor named Savannah. She was handling the off-market sale of the Langdon family's coastal property, their crown jewel. The one they used for Christmas card photos, garden parties, and those bland seafood dinners where nobody really laughed. The house I once sat in, quiet as a shadow, while Peter talked about hedge funds I didn't care about. Apparently, they were liquidating it. Savannah was reaching out because she had heard, through someone unnamed, that I had an interest in coastal property development and might be a silent investor. Tamika and I read that email over lunch and laughed so hard we nearly choked on our sandwiches. You should buy it, she joked, still chewing. Make it a halfway house for tattooed women with side hustles. But something about it stuck. Could I? I ran the numbers. Between my growing portfolio, the vending machine income, Etsy store, and a surprise licensing deal I'd landed with a design studio in Nashville for my leather patterns, I could swing it. It wouldn't be easy, and I'd need a small loan for part of the down payment. But I had excellent credit, thanks to years of quietly doing the work. I didn't hesitate. 2 weeks later, my offer, clean, fast closing, with no contingencies, was accepted. They didn't know it was me. I submitted through a third-party LLC I'd set up the year before for tax purposes. Tamika helped handle the legal side. She was giddy the whole time. You're seriously about to own the house they treated you like an intruder in, she said. This is poetic. This is Beyoncé-level revenge. I didn't feel triumphant in a loud way. It was quieter than that. More grounded. Like I was rebalancing something that had been lopsided for too long. The closing happened fast. I visited the property with Savannah to do a final walkthrough. Everything looked exactly the same, the manicured hedges, the wraparound porch, the muted, expensive furniture that never looked like it had been lived in. There was even a faint outline of the family's crest still hanging above the fireplace. I'll be painting that wall, I said. Savannah laughed. Whatever you do, it's yours now. The day the sale closed, I got a call. A number I hadn't seen in a long time. I answered out of instinct. Cassie. Mark's voice. He must have found out. You bought the house, he said, barely above a whisper. I did. Silence. They're devastated, he said finally. My parents. They didn't know until the papers came through. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. That makes sense. He didn't ask why. He didn't try to convince me of anything. Just said, "You always were smarter than all of us." I let that sit. Let him feel the truth of it. Then I said, "I'm going to turn it into something useful. A co-op space for artists. Workshops. Women-owned business retreats. Maybe a rotating gallery. Something that actually contributes to the world." Wow, he said. "They'll hate that." I know. We didn't say goodbye. He just hung up, and I stood there for a long time in my studio, listening to the quiet hum of the greenhouse fans and the distant rattle of tools drying on the bench. The transformation took months. I brought in local artists to help redesign the house, ripped up the sterile rugs, brought in color, texture, life. The formal dining room? Turned it into a maker space with sewing machines, printers, and a massive communal work table. The sitting room where Joanna once offered me wine like a peace offering? Now a gallery that hosted monthly exhibits for regional women artists. The Langdon crest? I didn't just paint over it, I commissioned a mural in its place. Bold, sweeping lines. A woman on a motorcycle surrounded by wildflowers. Vibrant. Unapologetic. By the time the local newspaper did a story on the new space, word had traveled. I never needed revenge. But this? This was a full-circle moment with extra flourish. A few months after the article ran, I got one final letter. Handwritten. No return address, but I knew the script, it was Joanna's. It said only, "We didn't understand you. I see now that was our loss. I hope what you've built gives more than we ever knew how to. I wish you peace. J." No fanfare. No attempts to reclaim dignity. Just acknowledgement. I folded it, tucked it in the back of the same drawer that held Mark's letter, and closed it for good. And that was it. I didn't ruin them. I didn't drag them through court or scream in their faces or burn bridges. I did better than all that. I built. I planted myself exactly where they said nothing would grow, and I bloomed. In my own way. On my own terms. And that is the kind of revenge you never have to explain.